Bills Mafia. On tonight's special edition of the Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down the NFL Scouting Combine. Our focus tonight will be on defensive prospects and how they fared in Indianapolis. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. This is a special edition on a Sunday night, not a Monday night, because we want to hit both sides of the football. We're going to do defense tonight, breaking down all that happened at the NFL Scouting Combine. And then tomorrow night, we'll be breaking down the offensive players. So I know a lot of you probably want to talk wide receivers, and we get it. But we're trying to break these shows into two. And since defense went first, we're going to go defense first here. And then we're going to talk about offense tomorrow night. And I'll tell you what, Dave, I'm ready to go. I got the Belichick sort of cutoff hoodie on. I got my binoculars over here. I've been prepared. I've been glued to the couch all weekend. So I'm ready to talk some NFL prospects.
It's an exciting weekend because it's one of those where you can come in, you can come out, you can kind of catch up. It was funny. Like I just turned it on yesterday and Brandon Bean all of a sudden is there sitting there with Rich Eisen. I was like, oh, didn't know Brandon Bean was going to be sitting down with these guys. Maybe I missed that, but yeah, it's cool. And you get to hear from the GMs and they're a little bit more loose, right? Sometimes
that's what I love about it too. Like it's just 4 hours, but it's just like 4 hours. Like you're sitting in your living room with Daniel Jeremiah. You're sitting in your living room with Peter Schrager or Charles Davis. Like you're just like, it feels like you're just having a conversation with them. And Daniel Jeremiah does such a great job of breaking down prospects, comparing them measurable wise. They always give these really cool anecdotes, stories you don't know about players. People like Schrager come in, talk about things that they've heard from, around talking to NFL GMs, talking to scouts, etc. So it's just really like, man, 4 hours didn't feel like 4 hours watching the skill position players on offense yesterday. Before we get to the prospects, though, some Buffalo Bills related news. Adam Schefter came in today reporting the Buffalo Bills will, in fact, release running back Nyheim Hines. They will save $4.6 million, take a $500,000 dead cap hit. I will say this. I wouldn't rule out, and we've had this conversation previous, Nyheim Hines could still return to the Buffalo Bills on a veteran minimum deal if there really isn't a market for his services elsewhere. The Buffalo Bills had to make this move. You can't pay a running back, especially a running back coming off an ACL, that much money. But if the market isn't there, he could come back.
Yeah, and I think obviously when the Bills traded for Hines originally, they had grand plans for him as far as being integrated into the return game and finding a special role for him on offense. But now obviously coming off the injury, you saw the emergence of James Cook. It becomes less of a priority, especially because you saw what the Bills could get out of Ty Johnson last year, a guy that they just signed off the street. And it's just not a premium position to spend dollars on in this particular offseason, right? I'm not saying there isn't a time and place for it, but for Nyheim Hines in this particular situation, it just made the most financial sense.
All right, let's transition now to defensive prospects. But before we do, this show, as always, is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. And I'll tell you what, I wish I had some Picassos to eat while I was sitting on my couch this weekend watching the NFL Combine. But let's start with the defensive line, specifically edge rushers. And I want to give a quick shout out to Ryan Talbot from New York Upstate. Did a great job. He put together a list of all the guys the Buffalo Bills met with at the Combine. He provided links to all the various different sources. I know Mookie was on the ground at the Combine. He did a great job of answering or asking that question to dozens and dozens of prospects. It seemed like for the upper end guys, it's like, no duh, the Buffalo Bills talk to all the top end wide receivers in Indy. But some of the smaller school names, it was really cool to hear, hey, this guy who's probably projected to be a 5th or a 6th round pick talk to the Bills. That shows maybe the Buffalo Bills has some legit interest in that player. And it's also important to note that the Buffalo Bills get 75 formal sit downs in Indy, and we're only going to know about a quarter of them. So just because a player's name isn't listed doesn't mean the Buffalo Bills did not talk to them in Indianapolis. We'll never know for certain unless they're drafted and we get that behind the scenes information, whether a lot of these guys ever truly did talk to the Buffalo Bills. But for edge rusher, the Buffalo Bills confirmed spoke with 2 guys, Javon Solomon out of Troy and Jaylin Hunt out of Houston Christian. So 2 smaller school, 2 middle round type of draft picks. I'm sure they met with some of the top end edge rushers, but it wasn't reported. Solomon, 6'1", 246 pounds, but he's got 33 plus inch arms, ran a 4.7, 240, 166 split, 37 vert, 911 broad. He's got 49.5 career tackles for loss, 33 career sacks. He's going to be turning 23 in the fall. He's one of those other older prospects because of COVID. Jaylin Hunt might be the most interesting small school prospect in the entire draft out of Houston Christian, 6'4", 252, 34 plus inch arms, 4'6", 40, 1.6 split, 37.5 vert, 10.8 broad, former safety. This dude's a freak athlete, and his frame could fill out even more. So 2 pretty intriguing names for the Buffalo Bills that they at least spoke to.
Really intriguing. And obviously Solomon was a guy that we had talked about in the preview, wondering about the height, right, with him, but noting the fact that we did point out he did still have the longer arms, and really he ran the 40 well. And also out of all the guys that did the bench, he was the 5th most bench reps of all the defensive ends, right? So if you're talking about a guy who's only 6 foot tall, you're wondering about the arms. Maybe you're a little concerned about the chest and arm strength on a guy like that, but he showed out and had 23 reps on the bench as well. So you like to see that. And Jaylin Hunt really tested well across the board, as you've already mentioned. And it's really interesting that the Bills kind of like formally kind of, confirm these 2 particular interviews, because you figure like, okay, the Bills, they have a need at edge. They need to get a little bit younger. We don't know what's going to happen with AJ Epinesa and Leonard Floyd. There is an apparent huge hole there behind Von Miller and Greg Rousseau. So very interesting. I was very especially happy that they met with Solomon, because he's been one of my favorites in this process so far.
This isn't the deepest edge class in the world, but the top 3 guys have certainly separated themselves, and all 3 of the top guys checked all the boxes they needed to in Indy. The thing is, none of these 3 guys will likely make it to the Buffalo Bills at 28. Those 3 guys, Letty Latu out of UCLA, he checked all the boxes he needed to check testing wise. The medicals will be big for him because of injuries he's had in the past. Jared Verse, I mean, his sheer power that we saw on display in Indy was just incredible. And then to go with that sheer power, run a 4.6 and clean up in the agility drills the way he did was just super impressive. You get a lot of Will Anderson vibes from Jared Verse. The talk out of Indy is he's now a top 15 type of dude. And then Dallas Turner, 6'2", 247 pounds. Just the upside there is insane. He's got the 34 plus inch arms, the 83-inch wingspan, which is just insane for a guy who's 6'2". Here's my question to you. Like, we won't go too much into detail with these 3 guys, but you're the Buffalo Bills, you're picking at 28, and one of these guys is sitting there at the beginning of the 20s still. Do you consider trading up for any of these 3 guys?
Yeah, I definitely would. I mean, look, obviously we need to see how free agency goes, but like these guys are a notch above. I mean, Jared Verse, like, man,
he's my favorite
impressed. I think he's my favorite as well. And it's just like, I liked him before, obviously really didn't have any kind of hope that he would be available to the Bills. But again, we start talking about, oh, we don't think this guy's going to be available. We don't think this guy's going to be available. Somebody or somebodies are going to fall. We don't know which position or which players, but if these guys start falling and Brandon Beane has 10 draft picks, and the big question mark will be what have the Bills done in free agency? Obviously, we don't know that yet. But if the Bills don't do anything material in free agency, if AJ Epinesa is out the door, if Leonard Floyd's out the door, if they bring back Shaq Lawson, let's say on a minimum deal, and they have just Shaq Lawson, Kingsley Jonathan, Von Miller, and Greg Rousseau as their four, quote, top four defensive ends, why not make a play for a guy like Jared Verse to inject some youth into that group? So look, I would be all for it given, how certain things play out in free agency.
Yeah, because if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're sitting at 28, it's now time to have a realistic conversation about Chop Robinson. There was no Senior Bowl for Chop Robinson, so this is the first time he's been measured, right? 6'2", 254 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. His length is concerning, and the people who watch the tape on him, they say it. The length is a concern with Chop Robinson. But what is he known for? That absolutely elite electric first step, his burst coming out off the snap. And that showed in the testing. 4.49 40 at that size is insane. 1.54 10-yard split is insane. 34.5-inch vert, 10.8 broad. He essentially checked all the boxes. He is what you see on tape athletically.
Yep.
That being said, 6 career sacks in college. This dude is the ultimate projection. So if it costs me a 4th-round pick to move up to go take Latu or Verse or Dallas Turner, sign me up, because I am so scared the Buffalo Bills are going to draft Chop Robinson. It could work out, but man, I'm not going to feel great about it when it first occurs. Like when they first draft him, I just won't.
It will feel a lot like OA from a few years ago, I think, when we were having the same conversation about him. Again, I'm not trying to scout the helmet here, but like there are some parallels that we can draw from these Penn State guys. And look, Chop Robinson, I think we need to kind of maybe mentally prepare ourselves that if the Bills do stay put at 28, that's a realistic option for them. I think profile wise, he could fit in. Learn from Von Miller. Maybe that's a good situation for him. He, in theory, gives you a very nice compliment to a guy like Gregory Rousseau athletically, right? But the production, like you said, and it is a projection. So there is some risk there. And I think if you're the Bills and you really need to shore up that defensive line this year, like for sure, that is a risky pick.
Yeah, and if you look at it too, this is one where the Buffalo Bills actually have a connection to Chop Robinson. Sean McDermott has spoken in the past how he has this like circle of coaches that he communicates with, that he has conversations with, that he trades ideas with. One of those coaches is Dave Aranda. We know that Dave Aranda influenced the Trey White pick. He probably likely influenced the Terrell Bernard pick. Another one of the coaches sort of in McDermott's inner circle is Manny Diaz. And Manny Diaz, he's at Duke now, but he was a defensive coordinator at Penn State for a season with Chop Robinson this past season. So Sean McDermott can speak to Manny Diaz and talk to Manny Diaz about what the Buffalo Bills could expect with a player like Chop Robinson. Now that could be a good thing for Chop, or it could go the other way, and it could be a bad thing for Chop Robinson as well. So the Buffalo Bills have a connection there. One comp I saw for Chop Robinson was Yannick Ngakoue, which is good in the terms in the sense that Yannick is a guy who's racked up a ton of sacks in his career, but it's also bad in the sense that Yannick Ngakoue is very much a guy who cares about rushing the passer and rushing the passer only, and leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to stopping the run. Chop Robinson gets a lot of those sort of negative projections, as well as a guy who just is not a big fan of setting the edge, stopping the run. He's all about getting the quarterback. His nose is for the quarterback, which is a really good thing in the National Football League, and he could be really good at it. But maybe Sean McDermott wants a more well-rounded player, and that's just all the more concerning about a guy like Chop Robinson.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when we start to now talk about some of these other guys that we're about to talk about, is that really worth the risk, right? And so a lot of these other guys we're about to talk about tested well, and their tape also speaks pretty highly. So why don't we get into it? This next group here.
Yeah. Darius Robinson is another guy I wanted to talk about. He's a guy we spotlighted at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy we spotlighted on the preview show. He's not Boogie Basham, right? I want to get that out of the way right now. He's not Boogie Basham. Boogie Basham had shorter arms, Darius Robinson, his arm length is insane. 6'5", 285. He's got 34.5-inch arms, 10+ inch hands, but 4.95 40, 1.73 split has an edge. Like, I don't know, man. Like, that's where you start to think about Boogie and you start to get hesitant because you're like, where does Darius Robinson play? Is he a 3-tech? He didn't have a lot of success in college as a 3-tech. He blew up when he moved to the edge. But then those numbers as an edge, you're like, so is he a 5-tech? That's not what the Buffalo Bills do. So because his success in college came on the outside, and you look sort of at some of those testing numbers, the 4.95, the 1.73 split, you're just like, it's like, where do we slot Darius Robinson? And that's where the hesitancy comes in, because Darius Robinson is very much a football player the Buffalo Bills would like. His football character is off the charts.
His football character is off the charts. And when I look at guys who I trust in watching tape, like Eric and Anthony and others that are in the scouting community, they sit there and they say, and they tell me, hey, these testing results shouldn't be a major concern. These are not like abnormal results for a guy this size. If he's truly going to play edge at the next level, I do wonder about what does that mean from what direction are you headed if you're the Bills, if you pick a guy like Darius Robinson, right? What is your plan on the defensive line? Is your plan that Darius Robinson essentially plays the AJ Epinesa role that you had from this year, and you expect Von Miller to truly be your true pass rusher back to form? Because to me, if I'm kind of like projecting, that's kind of how I would see the trio from this past year of Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, and Groot minus Von Miller. I would see him filling in more of that AJ Epinesa type role, and it would be Groot, Robinson, and Von Miller. Obviously, Von Miller playing the role he was supposed to play, what Leonard Floyd did last year. So it is a very interesting discussion, right? Because I think the answer is what do the Bills want to do from an edge perspective? Do they want to get better at rushing the passer? I think the clear answer is yes. They still were up in the top of the league in sacks, but I think there is something to be said about Leonard Floyd and AJ Epinesa possibly not being there this year. So I think priority number one has to be getting a guy that can get to the quarterback for me, when you have other guys like Shaq Lawson available who can help you in the run game. So it's really interesting. Robinson is an interesting player.
Yeah.
Would you I'll ask you this. Would you be okay with the Bills taking him at 28?
Yeah. Ralph Wilson Sr. comes in and says the Bills would make Robinson lose 30 pounds like Epinesa. If they did that, then no, my answer is no. But if they let Robinson be Robinson, they trust that at his size, he can be a legitimate player for us in whatever scheme Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich want to run. I'm on board with Darius Robinson at pick number 28. Daniel Jeremiah said, listen, he comped him. He was like, he's a taller Cameron Jordan. And Cameron Jordan was down on the field doing one of the player telecasts for NFL.com or NFL Plus. And Cameron Jordan's like, yeah, he kind of reminds me of me a little bit. So if the Buffalo Bills can go and at pick 28 add a taller Cameron Jordan, like a power type of edge, I'm on board with that. So yes, I'm hesitant. Yes, I have some misgivings, but I would pull the trigger on Darius Robinson at pick 28. Would you?
I think so. I mean, obviously, this is under the assumption that guys like Verse and those guys aren't there. Maybe the receivers you wanted to pick are the reason a guy like Darius Robinson is available, because there's been some kind of run on receivers. Maybe guys like Worthy and Franklin and all these guys that we're going to get to in the next show are gone, right? And he's literally the best guy in your board. Then, okay, yeah, I could get on board with that.
All right. How about some winners and losers? Who are some names that stuck out to you? Let's start with winners. Who are some guys you thought won the combine? Either guys you never really looked into and now you want to look more into, or guys you like who check some boxes for you. Who are some names that you liked at the combine?
Let me go to my stock up, stock down list here. Well, I mean, we talked about Javon Solomon already. I think he was a stock up kind of guy for me. I liked what he did testing wise. I think he confirmed some things for me from a strength perspective that I wanted to see. And obviously we got the information that the Bills met with him. So that's obviously very interesting. So Javon Solomon was a kind of a stock up kind of guy for me. I thought Gabriel Murphy was a stock up kind of guy for me. Third most reps on the bench, second best vert. I had kind of been grouping Murphy and Booker in that kind of same grouping, and obviously going into the testing, I really thought that like Booker was kind of my guy, but now I'm kind of like maybe going back to Murphy a little bit. So I thought Murphy was a winner for me. And so I thought like for me, Murphy and Solomon were the two guys I think that I would say did a little bit more than I expected. I think guys like Kneeland, guys like Mo Kamara, like they kind of did what I expected. So I wouldn't necessarily say they were winners, but they checked the box for me. But for me, go ahead.
No, so I had Mo Kamara on my winners list because even though he doesn't check like the Bills athletic boxes with the 32-inch arms, being 6'1", I thought he just looked so good in some of the drills
He does
they have them do. Like he just looks so fluid and so good. I love Mo Kamara. Marshawn Kneeland, I was blown away by his athletic testing, really. I mean, 6'3", 267 pounds.
Every category, he's like near the top.
34.5-inch arms, right? And he had elite RAS explosion and elite RAS agility grades. So Marshawn Kneeland could find his way into round 2, and Marshawn Kneeland could be an option for the Buffalo Bills at 60, right? Like that's where I had guys like Braylon Trice and Jonah Ellis, and I was considering them. Now I feel like Marshawn Kneeland has entered the chat.
He has.
And then one guy I want to go and I want to look at more is Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss. 4.64 40 was 4th. 1.61 split was 5th. 38-inch vert was the best of all the defensive ends. 10.2 broad was 7th. He's 6'3". He's 260 pounds, 33+ inch arms. So Cedric Johnson's a guy who tested well. He measured well. So I want to go and I want to look more into Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss.
Nice.
Any losers from Indy? And I hate to say losers, like guys who maybe you're a little bit more concerned about now.
I mean, it's hard not to say what I just mentioned, Austin Booker being maybe a loser of the group. I think mostly because of his weigh-in, to be honest. I feel like
4.8 40 at 240.
Right. And I mean, 6'4", right? Like you expect a little bit more sturdiness to a frame of a guy that's 6'4". Now, I think if you put on the games and you watch him, like there's some legit talent there, and that doesn't really change my opinion from that standpoint. But this is a guy that I think you will need to he'll need to be a little bit sturdier at the next level, or he's just going to get pushed around, I think. So for me, I think maybe Austin Booker was a bit of I'll call it a loser. I mean, I don't think he's like his stock's going to go down too much, but that that weigh-in does concern me a bit.
And I hate to say this. I think this is one of your guys too. Braylon Trice came in 30 pounds under his collegiate listed weight at 245. So you're like, all right, Braylon, you're going to come in 30 pounds lighter. Let's see you test off the charts. His testing scores were just average, and he's got 32-inch arms. So Braylon Trice, that was a little concerning to me. I don't want to call him the loser, but now it's like, like I'm a little bit more concerned about a guy like Braylon Trice now, knowing he's 30 pounds lighter than probably what he was playing at UW too, because it seems like he's a guy who shed weight to try to test better, and he didn't test better.
No, and like his advanced metrics, right, in college were really good, right? Really high pass rush win rate. Had the second, I think, most hits. I think it's in my notes. Let's see here. Second most hits on the quarterback in all of college football last year. 11th best pass rush grade. 17.6% win percentage, was just inside the top 30. So like some of his advanced numbers look good, but that's at a different weight. So it's then you're like, okay, like what happens here? So yeah, I mean I think that's fair to kind of maybe put him in a slight stock down list.
Let's shift our focus now to interior defenders. Again, the Bills probably met with a lot more guys than this, but we officially have word they met with Byron Murphy and they met with Braden Fiske, who was two of these guys who were stars of the combine. On our preview show, I made a prediction. I said Byron Murphy would test himself into the top 20 and Kris Jenkins would test himself into round 1 consideration. I think that proved to be true over the course of the weekend in Indy. Murphy, 6', 297, 32 and 7/8 inch arms. So he's on the smaller side, but a 4.87 40, 169 split, 33 vert, 9.3 broad, 28 bench reps. He destroyed the drills. A lot of people are talking about Byron Murphy as a top 15 pick now in this draft. Him and Jared Verse, I think, did a lot for their draft stock. On the other side, Kris Jenkins, 6'3, 299, 34-inch arms. That's more like it. 4.91 40, 1.7 split, 30 vert, 9.7 broad, 29 bench reps with those long arms. His nickname by Jim Harbaugh was the Mutant, and it has stuck. Even if he's not an option at 28, I think he has catapulted himself into the top 40. So he might be someone who it would be hard to get our hands on at 60. So you'd have to consider a trade up for a guy like Kris Jenkins. Murphy, Jenkins, we'll get to Braden Fiske in a little bit, but Murphy and Jenkins were two big winners from Indy.
Jenkins for sure, and you've kind of turned me on to him. He's currently sitting as my IDL number 2 on my board right now, just behind Byron Murphy, who's my IDL 1. Really just solid weekend for him. And I think like when you start to talk about tiering, right, this group, I think, we're going to talk about Fiske. I think Murphy, Jenkins, Fiske, and I think Newton probably is a little bit of a stock down after this weekend. But I think Murphy, Jenkins, and Fiske might be my top 3 right now as it stands.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what's great about Indy too, is one of the guys who didn't have an opportunity to work out, Johnny Newton out of Illinois. To me, Johnny Newton's like an Ed Oliver clone. Maybe he drops to 28 because other guys like Byron Murphy got a chance to make a name for themselves. So if that can drop like a Johnny Newton out of Illinois to us, that would be great too. In the preview show, we talked a ton about T'Vondre Sweat, and I said I need to see this dude weigh in at the 330s. If I want to take him at 28, I need to see him weigh in the 330s. He weighed in at 366. 6'4", 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands. He had really good testing numbers for his size.
Right.
But at the same time, to me, he's no longer in play at pick number 28. I needed to see him, like I said, slim down into the 330s. I understand that he outsnapped Byron Murphy at UT. I get that he does have pass rush upside, but I mean, 5 career sacks, 366 pounds. This dude's a plugger, right? And you don't draft a plugger at 28.
Yeah, I think Bruce Nolan said it best on Twitter when he said, I'm not drafting a 2-down player in the first round, right? I mean, look, I know there are some exceptions. We've talked about Jalen Carter. We've talked about some of these guys, right, that are just too good to pass on. But to me, that's not something. And again, let's presume the Bills are able to bring Daquan Jones back. That becomes a 2-down player pick at 28 who is going to play probably behind Daquan Jones, assuming the Bills do bring back Daquan Jones. That's not where I'm looking. And by the way, 366, 330, like it almost doesn't even matter because the Bills have not shown an interest in going for interior defensive lineman that weighs more than like 330 pounds since Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have really been in the building, right? Like we're talking about Daquan Jones and Starr being at the top end of kind of what they look at, which is in that, I'll say 320 to 330 range, fine. But like 360, that's never been on the Bills' radar. So it's just one of those things that like we love it, we love the idea of it, but I don't think it's realistic. I just don't.
Yeah. The 4-bag agility drill was really fun to watch, and Daniel Jeremiah did a great job of sort of breaking down, like showing Aaron Donald's success in the drill and then how the drill translate to actual games. And the 3 stars of the 4-bag agility drill were Kris Jenkins and Byron Murphy, who we already mentioned, and probably the star of the combine, Braden Fiske out of Florida State. He's a guy we've talked about at length on this show. We talked about him in the Senior Bowl. We talked about him in the preview. We loved him at first in the 3rd round, and then we loved him at pick 60. And now it seems like he's probably secured himself as a top 40 prospect in this draft. He's got short arms, but he measured comparably and tested comparably to Ed Oliver, who went in the top 10. And you could just tell in these drills, he just moves differently. He's explosive. And that shows on his tape too. And a bunch of the draft Twitter guys will be like, look at this drill, look at this explosion. Here's some plays that show where this explosion showed up and where we should have seen this coming from a guy like Braden Fiske. He was the first to lead his group in the 40, the vert, and the broad since 2004, and his 89 athleticism score from NFL Next Gen Stats led all defensive tackles. Made some money in Indianapolis this week, Braden Fiske.
And I think Bills fans love Braden Fiske. I think that's the kind of guy we can relate to. Right? He just screams the type of guy that would fit well culturally. Like it feels like a perfect sort of match, but then you have to question whether or not it makes sense at pick 28 if he's there to pull the trigger, because he, I think, like you said, secured himself as a top 40 prospect. Is he going to find himself in that no man's land between the Bills' first and second round picks?
Here's my hot take.
Know.
Here's my hot take. You know, a team that always seems to just fly in the face of like consensus? The team that picks right after us at pick 29, the Detroit Lions.
The Lions, yeah. They did that last year.
That would be a fit, I think, for Braden Fiske. So, like, if the Bills don't pull the trigger at 28, they might not even be in trade.
He definitely seems like a Dan Campbell type of dude. He screams.
I'm vibing with Braden Fiske at 29 to Detroit if the Bills don't take him at 28. Who are some winners from the combine for you? Because I have a list here of guys. Let's skip over the losers. Maybe if there's a guy that really like lost something, you could mention him. But let's talk about some guys that stood out to us. Who are some guys that stood out to you at defensive tackle?
I mean, look, for me, it's one of the guys that I think was on my pre-show notes, and he actually, or pre-combine notes, Jordan Jefferson for me from LSU. I think he's strong, most reps on the bench of any IDL.
With 33-inch arms. That's impressive.
With 33-inch arms. He's in that kind of weight range that the Bills would go after, 323. It's kind of like, for me, that sort of natural backup to Daquan Jones, but he can slide over and play the B gap in a pinch. And I thought that strength on display, something that the Bills need, strength in the interior of that D-line. I thought Jordan Jefferson, and again, I liked him before the combine, so maybe this is just an affirmation of what I felt beforehand, but I did like Jordan Jefferson. And I also, as Kris says here, how did DeWayne Carter and Maason do?
DeWayne Carter checked the box for me. I don't think he stood out, but he checked the box.
He checked the box, but I think it solidified to me, and I'll put him on a slight winner list as well. Vertical was good athletically, had an under 5-second 40. So he's quick, he's athletic. He had the 5th most batted balls of all interior defensive linemen in college football last year. So he can get up and knock it down, as evidenced by that vertical. So I think, yes, he checked the box, but I'll kind of highlight that box in green, because I think it was like a little more towards the positive for him.
I know in most mock draft simulators you can get Dwayne Carter comfortably with the Bills' 3rd round pick. I don't know, and I say this a lot, right? And at the end of the day, I say this a lot, so that means that there's a lot of players, and ultimately a lot of these aren't going to be true. But if I wanted to feel safe in getting Dwayne Carter, you might have to take him at 60. Like I think he has definitely worked his way into day 2, and I think as the pre-draft process continues, I think Dwayne Carter is just going to rise and rise and rise. I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with him. An interesting name, the another one that Kris Jenkins mentioned, was Maason Smith out of LSU. 6'5", 306, 35-inch arms, right? This is, in Maason Smith, a Jeffrey Simmons, Dan Williams type of body. And he tested very, very well for his size. Now, the knock on Maason Smith, number one, he's a pass rusher first, and he needs a lot of help in the run game. So how are the Buffalo Bills going to view that? Can we fix this guy in the run game, or can we not fix this guy? That could go a long way towards the Buffalo Bills saying yes or no on a guy like Maason Smith. He had a bad season at LSU, but he was coming off of a torn ACL. And I've talked to some people close to the LSU program who say he really started to come on towards the end of the year, which tells you that maybe there's a lot of upside there, being now 2 years removed from his ACL injury. He's a buy low, big reward kind of guy. You'd think probably he'd be available on day 3, but he could sneak into day 2 because of just how freakish Maason Smith is.
Yeah, I mean, this interior D-line class is kinda growing on me a bit. Like, I at first, I wasn't, like, super wild about it, but then I'm like, "Okay, there's some guys in these different
Yeah.
tiers that I can kinda, like, get behind." So, like, all is not lost, Bills fans, if we don't get an interior defensive lineman in the first round. I know we want Braden Fiske. I know
Yeah.
there's a big contingency who wants T'Vondre Sweat, who I just don't think it's realistic, but there are some other guys, Dwayne Carter, Maason Smith. There are guys there that if the Bills want to pounce at the right time, they could be available.
Another guy in the comment section a lot of people are mentioning, and I actually didn't butcher his name on the previous show, Ruke Orhorhoro. I like
Yeah,
it's like
wow,
kind of like
okay.
you feel like a dog when you say Orhorhoro.
Yeah.
He tested very well. He's a rocked up dude. Like he just looks the part. He's a day 2-3 tech. So where if we re-sign Daquan Jones, you could bring in a guy like Ruke. He can really be a disruptor on pass rushing downs with Ed Oliver. He can sub in for Ed Oliver. I like Ruke a lot. For those of you who maybe are sad that we're probably going to lose out on Braden Fiske, maybe I can sell you a Logan Lee out of Iowa as the next finger quotes Kyle Williams. He's a 3 tech. He's only 281. He's got shorter arms at 32 inches, but 7th best shuttle since 2010, 6th best cone since 2010. He had elite explosion and agility scores in RAS. He had a really good Shrine week. Logan Lee, I talked about him on our Senior Bowl show when I mentioned guys who had a big Shrine Bowl week. And he's a guy who I think is going to be rising up draft boards and could be an early day 3 pick. So I like Logan Lee a lot. Whether the Buffalo Bills agree at 281, he fits with what they want to do. That's going to be sad. He's a guy who always just did his 111th at Iowa. And I thought Mekhi Wingo, who slimmed down also into the 280s, he popped for a lot of people. So a lot of options at defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills. So we're going to transition now to linebacker, and we're going to start talking about some of the linebackers in this draft class. The Buffalo Bills met with 2 guys, Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State, who's projected to be a day 3 guy, and the guy who could be the number 1 linebacker drafted had a big week, and that was Peyton Wilson out of NC State. The top 2 linebackers, it really seems like in Indy solidified themselves in Peyton Wilson and Edgerrin Cooper. That is to say, Junior Colson did not work out, so there could be a wild card there to be LB1. But man, Peyton Wilson, and we're not going to talk too much about him because I doubt the Buffalo Bills pull the trigger on him, but he blew it up in Indy. Unless medicals become an issue, he's probably going to be the first linebacker off the board.
Probably. I mean, Jeremiah Trotter is going to throw his name into the ring as a dark horse candidate to be LB1, but he probably won't.
Could you imagine the conversations we would have around Peyton Wilson if this was last year? Like
oh my God,
he would be our Campbell on steroids, dude.
I mean, he would be like Eric would have done like 3 different film rooms on him. We would have been like, we have to trade up to get this guy to make sure we can get him. Like, it is fortunate that the Bills don't need a linebacker this year, because I think there's a pretty significant drop off after the top 5 or 6 guys. But man, it does make me feel good to see my NC State guy Peyton Wilson doing so well. And I mean, just killed it testing wise as well. I mean, just dominated. And some team is going to get a really, really good player there. Maybe it's going to be someone that we don't have to worry about in the NFC. Let's just hope. Maybe the Giants,
Charles G comes in and says Edgerrin Cooper is his linebacker 1 due to a missile. Most draft people I see say that Cooper has the best game of any linebacker. His tape against Alabama is the best of any linebacker in the draft class. So on top of that, he checked all the boxes in Indy. So Cooper could be the first linebacker off the board for sure. Jay Davis comes in and says Curtis Jacobs, who met with the Bills out of Penn State, says elite sideline to sideline speed, has great play recognitions. Would love to see him as a Dodson replacement. Curtis Jacobs in the 5th or so round with his 4.58 40, good explosion scores. He's a guy who interests me. Who are some other winners that you have coming out of Indy? Maybe some third day guys the Buffalo Bills could be interested in.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought Jordan McGee looked pretty good.
Yeah, he made a lot of lists. He made a lot of winners lists.
Yeah, ran a pretty good 40 time, 4.55. Your guy Trevin Wallace, I thought, was pretty solid. Looked pretty smooth in the drills. I didn't linebacker is kind of where I took some breaks, I would say, from
me
the
too.
watching. But McGee and Wallace, I think when I was watching, they definitely caught my eye. And I think, I mean, ultimately, when you look at the testing, they did test pretty well. One thing I will say is that, like, Wallace, like, I think in a different year, he could have been a guy we've been talking about. Like, maybe he could have been like a dark horse Tremaine Edmonds replacement, like a couple, like 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, we were having that conversation if Trevor Wallace was in the draft last year, I think.
So like he did, he did what he needed to do. And then I thought Cedric Gray just really, as you said before, for who was I talking about? Yeah, I think he checked the box, right? For me,
I think a lot of linebackers, other than Wilson and Cooper, stood out. I think a lot of guys just check boxes. The only one I was really disappointed in was my guy Easton Gibbs, a 4.36 Raz at 6 foot 234 with only 32.5-inch arms. I wanted to see more out of Easton Gibbs. I was a little disappointed with that, but obviously linebacker testing numbers aren't always, the biggest indicator on what their professional careers could be. Chosen 1NB comes in and says Deloach, in his opinion, could be a solid special teamer like Bernard, great speed. The 215 pounds kind of scares the shite out of me. It's like safety size, but yeah, Kellen Deloach stood out in a crowded field of linebackers, especially with that 40 that he ran. It was pretty good. I thought the two Ohio State guys, Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, looked good. I'm going to go back and watch Edifon Olufoshio out of Washington. He stood out, and the NFL Network guys like Daniel Jeremiah were very high on him. He ran a 4.56 40. So linebacker is definitely where I think I needed to still do more work, and we'll have a linebacker show at some point this offseason before the draft. So we'll have definitely done more homework on some of these day 3 guys by then, but those are just some of the names that really stood out.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. On to the secondary as we close out the show here. The Buffalo Bills met with a couple of corners at the combine. Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, who could also obviously move to safety. He did not test because he's recovering from an injury. Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. I thought that was an interesting one. Obviously, the Bills' new DB coach, Jimmy Ladai, has some familiarity with him. MJ Devonshire. I really like that one because he's got some punt return flexibility out of Pitt. He's a speedster. I liked Devonshire before the combine, and we even spoke about him in the preview show. But then let's focus on the safeties. The Bills met with and are confirmed to have spoken with Javon Bullard, a guy we've talked about, Kam Kinchins, a guy we've talked about, and Kalen Bullock, the center fielder out of USC, all guys we've talked about. Let's start with a guy that we talked about a ton in our preview show, and that was Kam Kinchins. Came in at 5'11", 203. A big deal is being made over his 4.65 40. But you also have Brandon Beane's comments from the combine. He literally highlighted Kurt Coleman as a guy who years ago did not test well, but had a huge impact on the Carolina Panthers defense. And that instincts and awareness and ball hawking are way more important to the Buffalo Bills when it comes to scouting safety than their athletic scores. And Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are proof positive of that. So if Kam Kinchins 4.65 40 somehow drops him to 60, that would be absolutely incredible. I got my comp for him as Juan Thornhill. So I think that is to add a Juan Thornhill type to the secondary, a guy we loved years ago in the pre-draft process. I'd be excited for that.
I'd be excited for it. And I mean, he didn't test well at all, like worse than the broad jump. Obviously, we know about the 40 time. And the thing is of this is like, okay, I get what Brandon Beane's saying. Kurt Coleman was a 7th rounder. He was limited athletically. And I understand that there is something to be said about instincts and ball hawking and all that. So look, we know Micah Hyde, we know Jordan Poyer, they didn't test the best. They didn't have the best RAS scores. It's not always just about that, right? But I will say is if that pushes Kam Kinchins down the board and it makes sense at a certain spot and the Bills haven't picked a safety yet, then I would be all on board for that. But for me, it's the right spot, right? Because I love a guy like Javon Bullard. Like he's up there for me. Like he's one of my favorites in this class. I thought he looked really smooth in all the drills. But Kinchins in the right spot makes a ton of sense if Brandon Beane is confident that what he's seen and what he's shown on the tape, which is king, will translate to this Bills system. Then I'm on board for that.
Daniel Jeremiah made a comment while the safeties were working out. He said, you probably won't see a safety go round one unless Cooper DeJean gets drafted as a safety, but you could see a run. And he said around the 40 mark, you could start seeing a run in the late second round of safeties. I think that starts with the Eagles, who have a huge need at safety, and the Cowboys have a need. So there's a number of teams in front of the Bills at 60 that have needs at safety. If the Buffalo Bills want to get their guy, they might not want to wait. They might want to try to trade up from 60 if they don't take someone at 28, which I'm kind of leaning towards. I hope not, unless it's Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, I'm kind of out. I'm kind of now out on safety on the first round, to be honest. Like, fine, Cooper DeJean. Like, I'm not gonna I'll be fine with it if the Bills really have a plan to move him to safety and that's what they want to do. Like, cool, I'm good with it. But I kind of now like sort of, I don't know, getting in my trenches a bit about like what I want. And I'm not gonna like sit here and say like, no, you can't do that. But like, I'm kind of leaning now away from taking a safety in round one after I've gotten a chance to kind of look into a lot of these other guys. And I think there will be some really good talent on the board in rounds 2 and 3. So, man, yeah, that's a tough one for me.
I think for the most part, all of the safeties, and there's a dozen of them, some of them didn't work out at all. And then some of them just, everyone checked boxes. I don't feel like anyone had a bad day outside of that 40 time from Kam Kinchins, which is overblown. I think most safeties came into Indy and checked the box of what we expect them to be. There were a couple of outliers. One is one of your favorites, so I'm going to let you speak about him in a moment. And one is one of my outliers, so I'm going to speak about him in a moment as well. But I'll let you start. One of the biggest winners in Indy was Cole Bishop.
Yeah, Cole Bishop obviously was on my, said non-trendy, but now he's trendy. So of course,
that
like,
Harrison Smith comp that they made hit pretty hard.
Ran the 4.4 540, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting. And he certainly looked pretty. I mean, he definitely didn't look the smoothest of all the safeties in the drills, but he looked smooth enough, right? And I think that the questions around his ability to kind of maybe play a little bit more center field, which he did at Utah, right? He played a lot of split, a lot in the box, a lot deep. That 40 time, I think, is going to give people a little bit more comfort that he can roam the back end a little bit more than maybe was initially thought, because I think a lot of his best plays and his best tape is at and around the line of scrimmage. So for me, Cole Bishop was a big winner at the safety spot, and again, is going to muddy the waters, I think, here now in the second round, third round.
The 29-inch arms are really the only concerning thing, especially if you want them to go mano a mano with like a tight end at the line of scrimmage. Right. That's where it can get a little concerning, and also engaging in the run game. But Cole Bishop's tape, he shows that he can do those things even with those 29-inch arms. My guy is another one of those classic guys where I find a guy, I'm intrigued by a guy, I research a guy, I'm like, man, I would love that guy in the 5th, 6th round. Then usually after about 3 weeks, I would love that guy in the early parts of day 3. Now I'm calling my shot. I think Dadrion Taylor Robinson out of Texas Tech might be a day 2 pick. He's a guy who might go in the 3rd round. He's a guy who blew up at the Shrine Bowl. People were just talking about Taylor Robinson out of Texas Tech at the Shrine Bowl like crazy. Then he came to Indy and he didn't just check boxes. I think he really flashed. Just 4.41 140. He had really good explosion scores. A little bit smaller at 5'10", 197, but his comp on NFL.com is Jordan Whitehead. Here was my favorite stat from Shrine Week. Using the zebra tracking, those things that they use to track like miles per hour and stuff, he was the most traveled player on day 1 of the Shrine Bowl, covering 4,804 yards. And he was also the most explosive player in terms of miles per hour, stop, start, etc., of any player at the Shrine Bowl on the first day using that zebra tracking. Dadrion Taylor Robinson is my dude in this draft. He blew up Indy. He was a big winner.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I saw what he was doing, I mean, the best 40 time of all the safeties and like how smooth he was, I was like, man, my wife's brother was over, my brother-in-law was over. We had just finished watching the F1 race and we turned on the combine right after, and it was the safeties, and we were like, DTD was coming on, and I'm like, hey, that's my co-host. That's Judge's favorite guy in this class, his favorite safety in this class. And then he runs the 4.4 140. So I'm really happy for you personally that he tested so well, because I know
Mm.
how much you've been pounding the table for him. And I will say you were early on him.
Yeah.
And so
He's my Rodrigo this year.
yeah,
He's my Malcolm Rodriguez this year. He is my
you
dude.
you were early on him. And guess what? There's going to be people coming out of the woodwork over the next several weeks getting on the DTD bandwagon, but you are the conductor and you were there first, I'll say.
I'll
So
tell you what though, because I mentioned check boxes. So let's close out the conversation with this, because I mentioned checking boxes. There are a number of safeties here. I have a list: Tyler Newbin, Kam Kinchins, DTD, Cole Bishop, Jaden Hicks, Javon Bullard, Bo Braid, Kalen Bullock, Tyke Smith, Jaylin Simpson. That's 10 guys that I just named. I just want the Buffalo Bills to walk out of the first 4 rounds with one of these 10 guys, because I don't dislike any of these 10 guys. There's not one of those guys where I'm like, eesh, right? Like, all 10 of those guys I genuinely like. Some more than others, but I like all 10 of those guys. Just walk out of the first 4 rounds with one of them.
yep. I mean, again, this is assuming all you have left, all you have in the, on the roster is Hamlin and Poyer, right? And we don't know what's going to happen in free agency. We don't know. Maybe the Bills will make me really happy and go out and sign Alohi Gilman, and they'll be able to go ahead and then draft a guy like DTD to pair with him, or draft a guy like Jaylin Simpson to go with him for future, for the future situation. But the Bills, I think at this point, whether it's free agency or the draft, it's clear they need to make an investment in this position, right? Like, it's time. Like, they can't avoid it anymore. They have to.
And they've tried. I think the board just hasn't fallen their way the past couple of years, because you've seen them work out guys like Lewis Seen and stuff in the past. So they've definitely been looking. Jeremy Chin, Kyle Duggar a couple of drafts ago. Those guys are all now free agents. So the Buffalo Bills have definitely been in the market a while. They're definitely 100% have to pull the trigger this year. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. Before we go, though, I want to talk to you guys about the Cover One Pass, because NFL free agency is just around the corner. Head on over to cover1.net and sign up for your very own Cover One Pass premium subscription. Each subscription is valid for 365 days, meaning it's going to carry you all the way through the 2024 regular season. This month's key One Pass feature is our comprehensive preview of NFL free agency. Eric, Anth, and many others have been taking time to create detailed scouting reports on players who could fit what the Bills are looking for in the market. You can find those detailed scouting reports on college players anywhere, but it's very rare for you to find write-ups like this on players actively in the NFL. So again, head on over to cover1.net and sign up for your very own One Pass premium subscription. There's going to be draft stuff on there as well. And there's some pretty cool giveaways. Dave, do you want to talk about maybe some of the things that we're giving away for anyone who signs up before the draft for the One Pass premium membership?
Yeah, so the One Pass premium membership, this is not something that we do a ton here, but the giveaways coming for this this time around, a PS5, which, I mean, could anyone get their hands? I don't know. Is it hard still to get a PS5? I don't know.
It's expensive.
I don't have one. It's expensive. I know that, and I know, like, it was impossible to find them. A Josh Allen jersey is going to be given away. A Bills neon, which is pretty sweet. I was trying to get one of those set up here in my little studio.
Sign up for a One Pass subscription.
It wasn't working. It wasn't working, but man, those things are sweet. So yeah, PS5, Josh Allen jersey, Bills neon, bunch of more stuff. So yeah, sign up for it. It's pretty sweet.
All right. Join us tomorrow for a live premiere of our offensive preview. We'll be breaking down all the wide receivers that worked out in Indy. We'll probably spend about 35 minutes on wide receivers and then like 15 minutes on running backs and call it a day tomorrow. But we'll be back in our normal time tomorrow, 9 p.m. with a live premiere breaking down the combine for offensive players. And then, Dave, next Monday, free agency, the tampering window opens, and we are no longer previewing, we are reacting. Now, the Buffalo Bills got some work to do to have some money, or else we'll still be previewing on Monday because the Buffalo Bills will not have the money to sign anyone yet. But hopefully there'll be one or two new toys that we can talk about next Monday here on the Air Raid Hour. But tomorrow, because this was a special episode, tomorrow we'll be back previewing the offense. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!